You are watching the AxonDAO podcast.
Hi, and welcome back to the AxonDAO podcast. My name is Cooks-Cambell. I'm the head of content here at AxonDAO, and I'm here today with Andrew Hemingway, who is the founder of the DeSci Alliance. So thank you for making the time to be here today, Andrew.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. And it's a privilege to join with you guys. Such an exciting project coming in at such an exciting time. So happy to be here today.
That means a lot, especially coming from you. I know you've been a big voice in this space for a long time. So can you tell me a little bit, because I don't think I actually know, how did you find your way to blockchain and to decentralized science?
Man, this is we only have like half an hour, right? So I'm not sure we can cover all that. But no, the TLDR basically is I come from sort of a traditional marketing background, building marketing teams, media teams, things like that, and had because I live in the state of New Hampshire. We have a lot of libertarians. We're known for our libertarian streak. We are a live free or die state after all. And there's this little project that was started here called the Free State Project. And the idea was to move people to New Hampshire to essentially take over and ultimately to secede from the Union.
Wow.
That may not seem relevant to our conversation, but it is because their whole premise was based on using Bitcoin to do it. So in 2010, I was introduced to Bitcoin just shortly after. I saw Bitcoin at 6 cents, for instance, very early, and was just by just random, fortune. Just happened to be around people who were into it and were buying it and were thinking about how to use it as a currency. For me, the currency piece never really connected dots, but what did was the technology. And I was fascinated with blockchain, like from the very beginning, speaking almost immediately about ways that blockchain could disrupt government, could disrupt, our financial systems and markets, and even science and research. And so it was really early, too early to find a career path there for someone who was non-technical. And so it took me about 10 years later. So in 2019, I joined the Tron ecosystem team and ended up leading their ecosystem team, helped to grow their over 100 million users, thousands of projects across across the globe, really. Ultimately, I'm comfortable with the way that Tron operates and was fortunate to be able to leave there and go to another great company called Avalanche. I was part of their growth team there as a senior growth lead, helped to launch their policy program, and just work with a US-based company that was doing just amazing things, I think, in a really great way. And then all my friends were making money in small protocols, and I was doing work on big protocols. And I was like, I got to find something, got to find an opportunity. So I ended up working with a number of really small protocols. And one of those ones that I worked with was doing something around what they called the decentralized private computer. And what they were doing was bringing shared private state on chain and bringing private sensitive data on chain. And ended up talking through that project to a lot of DeSci projects who are bringing health data, sensitive data, research data on chain. And so that's what really piqued my interest. And so some part of last year, I just started like thinking about it, talking about it, tweeting about it, writing about it. And, slowly but surely, just ended up building some momentum around DeSci, talking about DeSci and what was happening. And shortly after that, I started just kind of as a whim of like, I've got this momentum and things are happening and I'm trying to just, kind of catalyze this. And what I know how to do is build an ecosystem. So I just naturally did that. And so I started a community called the DeSci Alliance. And basically we are for the founders, funders, and friends of DeSci. And our whole emphasis is just to raise the volume, raise the visibility of DeSci as a viable industry within blockchain and within science generally. And since the point of starting that to today, now we're, I don't know, 3 months old or something. We're over 1,000 members. We have, many of the leading projects in the space. Of course, we've held now spaces with thousands of participants. Most famously, Andrew Huberman joined our space, so that was cool. But we've been able to make a lot of progress helping connect projects with funding, helping connect projects with technical founders, or just whatever the need is. And basically, since then, I've been taking 20 to 30 calls a week right now, just talking to DeSci projects, and helping just to basically connect them to resources or things that they need, as well as offering, like go-to-market type strategies and things like that. So yeah, that's my story of how I navigated through blockchain and now sit sort of in the DeSci space.
It seems like once you encountered this, it's like you really were like, this is where I need to be.
Yeah, it was a definite. It was a natural fit for me, just from a gift wise and perspective, but also just from an interest level. So I think I'm not alone in the sense that COVID was a real pivotal moment in our, in my life and in culture, world culture here, most specifically in distrust of institutions. Again, I'm libertarian and come from New Hampshire, so my level of trust for institutions is very low naturally. Uh, but that event really catalyzed that for me as a real moment of like, this is not good. And so since that point, I've been very interested in really owning my health, and I've made that a real point. And so when I came to DeSci, or a lot of people call it open science or citizen science, like these different names. When I came to DeSci, I saw the power of the blockchain to decentralize and to move science into a trustless state. And that's what I'm most interested in doing. I shouldn't have to trust my doctor. I shouldn't have to trust the scientists. I shouldn't have to trust the news. I should be able to verify what's happening, most specifically when it relates to my health and the health of my family. And right now, the way that the system is structured is we have to trust institutions, we have to trust the latest study, and we have to trust what our doctor tells us. And we shouldn't go looking for second opinions. And, I just think in today's day and age, and especially with the technology that the blockchain offers, that's what draws me and motivates me to be involved in DeSci.
You've mentioned this about the technology a couple of times. I think for people that are new to this space, they don't often understand the underlying technology. And so they do get seduced by kind of the currency aspect of it. Like that's really the story that's often told about blockchain and cryptocurrency is like, buy this coin, get really rich, buy this coin, get really rich. But what you saw immediately was the underlying technology and how that could be applicable and transformative across a variety of industries.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that is the key, right? So there are several characteristics of a true decentralized network that I think play especially into science, but into even in, financial and other industries that the blockchain has been most effective. One of those is immutability, right? So the idea that whatever has been committed to the chain is permanent and unchangeable is a very, very important piece of the puzzle. You never want to have studies altered or changed. You never want to have sensitive data being able to be manipulated or changed and altered to fit some sort of a narrative or a political agenda. And I think when you think about centralized institutions, the temptation and the ability to be able to do that is much, much, much higher. I'm not saying that happens. I mean, it does, but I'm not saying it happens. But the influence and the temptation simply like to be able to manipulate that to fit an agenda is much, much higher. So when you move that into what we call a trustless state and you put it on chain where it's immutable, you can't change it. And that's one of the characteristics that I think is very important. The other characteristic that's super important is just the public nature. By its very nature, blockchain is a public ledger. So it's a public database. Everything that you put on the blockchain is public, like literally everything. Your wallet address, how much you're holding. Anybody with anybody's wallet address can see how much they're holding in their wallet, what coins they're holding, when they bought them, how much they bought them for, right? Like every single thing is public on the blockchain. And this is both a feature and a hindrance. It's a hindrance because centralized organizations are very afraid of that and do not want to adopt. And when you talk to anybody in the blockchain industry, they say, we need institutions to adopt. And you're right. Problem is, they don't want to go public. Right? They're afraid, both from a competitive perspective, right? There's probably some legitimate reasons for that. And there's also probably some illegitimate answers for that. But I think that it's a great help because now you could say, okay, where was my medicine created? What was the formula that was used? I can validate and verify all the way across the entire way to the delivery to me that this is where it came from, and I know and I can trust that because the chain is immutable, it's public, it's verifiable, right? So like I can go through all of those pieces and come back and say, okay, I know that this is valid. When we're talking about health, we're talking about people's lives. Obviously, that's of the utmost importance. And so DeSci plays, I think, a really important role. The other piece that plays into this public piece is its fight against corruption. And I think inside of institutions in science today, it's ripe for corruption, whether it's happening or not. I won't say that. I won't make any claims about that, but certainly it is. And I think everyone who's involved in the traditional science space today knows that it's ripe for corruption. When you have centralized organizations, whether it's an institution of a hospital, pharmaceutical company, or a college, all of them have incentives to deliver certain results. And whether it's whether it's formulation of a drug, whether it's to hide some testing that didn't go so well, whether it's whatever the makeup is, there's a lot of incentive in the current structure to manipulate and to make it work out in your favor. And it's possible to do that because there is no transparency. You have no idea who's funding the studies that you're reading in support or against a certain drug. Like you have no idea. you don't know what the agenda was when the test was ran. So there's a lot of those types of things. Bringing that into a blockchain brings immediate transparency and allows for the end user ultimately to see the path and to have a level of trust around what is being delivered to them, knowing every data point that they might be interested in knowing along the way. And so those are, that's probably a deeper dive than you expected, but I think those are the things that draw me to DeSci in a big way.
Yeah, what I'm just thinking about, what stood out so much about what you just said is that when you have centralized organizations and then you have this lack of transparency, it kind of inherently creates the circumstances that just the natural result of that is an ulterior motive. You don't have the circumstances that allow for that open exchange of ideas or to even reach out and fund projects that may not be directly connected to one of those two things, either to the benefit of the institution or to the benefit of those funding.
Yeah, no, totally. So one of my most outrageous opinions, there's many, is that I don't think government should be involved in the funding of science at all. And in fact, when that occurred in the United States specifically, when the NIH became the sole source of funding for research, essentially, like we just saw a little disturbance in the NIH timeline. Many projects are out there going like, oh, we don't know if we're going to get funded, how we're going to get funded, what's going to happen, what's NIH money going to do, da 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 da, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is NIH is a political organization, and whether we want to pretend that it's not or it is, it's funded by the government. And the government is funded by political people with political agendas, right? And so when a president runs, like the last two presidential candidates just ran, and almost every presidential candidate for the last 50 years has made the promise they're going to cure cancer. Like I don't know if you remember, but Trump said, "I'm going to cure cancer." They all make this like claim, and what they mean is we're going to fund the NIH and direct them to look at and to give projects that are going after cancer an increased amount of funding. And NIH records show that they have disproportionately funded cancer above any other thing. The problem with that is you don't actually, it's unscientific to say we're going to go try and cure this one thing, right? What you should rather say is we're going to fund a lot of things. We're hoping that across the board here, some of these experiments, some of these trials, some of these tests end up proving that this is actually a tangential outcome that has been discovered. No, instead we're just focusing on cancer. So what does everyone do? Well, every institution then says, okay, well, money's only coming to cancer. So therefore, if you're a PhD student and your application for your thesis doesn't revolve around cancer, like. You're kind of like, there's only a limited amount of money for those types of things. So therefore, a lot of other very valuable work has gone unfunded and undiscovered. And because the NIH is the primary funding source, And because institutions have said, we're not going to dip into our, into our funds, you're going to have to raise funds for yourself. Oh, by the way, you can use our facilities and we own half of what you create, right? But we're not going to fund you. That's sort of because they know they can get money from the government. What it does is it creates all these perverse incentives that today TradSci sits back and says, well, this is science. And if it's been published in a peer-reviewed paper, then it must be credible. The problem with that is they're all on the take, right? They're all funded by the same source. They're all influenced by the same influence. And so, that's my very libertarian and biased view about sort of the current system. But I think that there's when you centralize science, you lose a great deal. And I think over the last 100 years in America specifically, we have lost a great deal. Europe is, and obviously in the same case, but science, the rate of innovation has dramatically slowed, dramatically. While the rate of technology has increased, the rate of innovation around health, bio, longevity, these things have decreased. And I think that what DeSci is going to do is going to open the funding floodgates to allow people who are interested in various things. Like I just was talking to someone who's an independent researcher, just recently got some funding through a community type of a grant, just by people who are interested around doing a large scale study in mouth tape. And does mouth taping at night work? There hasn't been any large scale studies about those sort of things. There's a million topics that can come up now that independent researchers can get funding for and can go and can study and can bring back learnings. And what I think is going to happen is you're going to see a massive wave of innovation that's going to erupt out of the DeSci space, while TradSci stuck kneeling at the altar of the NIH, begging them for some more penance.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that's not even really how science should work. I think, scientific researchers understand that your breakthroughs can come from any space. And so maybe the cancer breakthroughs that we're looking for won't come directly from researching cancer. I'm thinking of, I'm writing a book now on what the future of work is going to look like. I'm also an anarchist and a systems mistruster at heart. So I'm writing this book about hybrid work and non-traditional work models. And I pulled in a study on the science of productivity that talks about the default mode network. So they weren't directly researching Alzheimer's and dementia, but they found that in studying the default mode network and just in how it makes us more productive, there's actually some implications for Alzheimer's and dementia, that it might be linked to poor regulation of that network. And so I think that if we were funding a broader range of scientific projects, we may actually have a faster path to the breakthroughs that we're looking for the ones that our presidential candidates are identifying as a major priority.
Well, that's the point of decentralization, right? Is you have to decentralize the funding. Otherwise you have undue influence over the direction that it goes. And like you're saying, it's unscientific. It's not the way it should be. I know that it is the way it is. And a lot of people who are in TradSci are going to say, well, that's the way it is. And that it's hard to imagine that there's another possibility, right? But there is. I mean, just take for instance, just step back for a moment. Just take for instance, the amount that the average American family pays on health care and health insurance. We have some of the highest rates, obviously, in the world today. We spend more than any other country does on health insurance and health care than any other country out of pocket, right? On a per capita basis. Enormous amount of money that we spend. And like, to me, I mean, I wonder, what if a percentage of that went into DeSci? What if a presidential candidate instead said, look, we're going to give you a tax credit up to 10% of whatever you contribute or invest into a experimental science project. It doesn't have to be DeSci, but it could be any sort of experimental. Where would the citizens put their money? Like that to me is like the opportunity. That is what DeSci represents. Is we're going to do that. One of the things that I think is so fascinating is Reddit has been super successful, obviously gathering millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people together around all sorts of various topics. Some safe for work, some not. But inside of Reddit, you'll find large communities tailored around specific topics in their subreddits. I mean, you have people who are thinking about human performance. There are groups that are literally talking about how to sleep better at night. On human longevity. On all sorts of of bio and science, environmental. Like if you just go to those groups, you have real people. Many have degrees, many don't, but they're dedicated to researching and offering like information, like very valuable, highly valuable information. And to me, like that's the proof of concept for DeSci. All of these people have valid interests, but you know what? The problem is our system says, well, if you don't have a PhD, by the way, if you don't go to the right college, by the way, if you don't are part of the right program, and if you can't get the right funding from the NIH, then your idea doesn't matter. Like there's no pathway for you. What DeSci does is it says, you know what, those 300,000 people who are on Reddit, who are community members, who are all contributing around these, basic thoughts, let's turn them into a community. Let's fund a DAO. Let's fund a project. Let's do some real research, deliver that back to them. And when we bring a commercially viable product to market, everyone gets to benefit in that instead of a centralized company. That to me is like the most obvious path for DeSci to prove its viability. When 300,000 people start getting little deposits in their wallets because they participated and helped in the research of a project or a product that now sits on Walgreens store shelves, like, I mean, that's it, right? That's the dream. That's the hope.
So, how did you know you needed, like, what was that moment that you knew you needed to found the DeSci Alliance?
Well, that's a good question. So I started tweeting a little bit about this, and people were saying like, well, I guess, yeah, it was actually, I joined a Spaces. I was, I kind of just like, I was invited to join a space. I tweeted a few times and someone just reached out to me and said, hey, we joined a space and talked to us. I joined the space, and what happened was basically like just a lot of people started commenting after that and saying they appreciated my perspective or, point of view, and just thought it was interesting. And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, and people started saying, hey, can we jump on a call with you? And I just started meeting new projects and then I was like, well, all these people, like, I'm talking to this guy who needs to meet this guy, and that guy needs to meet this guy. And so how do I figure that out? So I just said, I'll just put you all in a community. And that way, when after we talk, I'll just throw you in the community and we can start to do that. Then I just, I started to do a few spaces that really seemed to grow really rapidly and got pretty significant really quickly. And, that was like the moment that I really stopped to understand, that there's real opportunity here.
With now you have over 1,000 members in this community. So the demand is definitely there. With that and with the growth that you've seen in the last few months, what are you finding people are the most excited about?
So the DeSci community still is at the point where they could say, I think every true DeSci project right now is saying we see the promise of DeSci, but the funding isn't there. I think every DeSci project that I'm talking to is saying to me today, like, basically, we need more funding in order to deliver. And what they haven't figured out is how to activate a real retail funding mechanism. They haven't been able to really unlock what communities can ultimately deliver. And so they're still going through, most of them, through the sort of traditional VC path, which is difficult to make a case, a real strong VC case for a lot of these projects. So I think many of them are stuck at the hurdle of funding and figuring out how to overcome that. Now, bio seems to be one of the first projects that I think has a funding mechanism in place that they're working on. I think it's still the jury's out on effectiveness, on where that all lands. They've certainly raised money for their DAOs, and there definitely seems to be some momentum there. They're the first one with like a real strong model that at least is proving to be viable. I am sure that there are other models that will come into existence. Even just yesterday, I saw another large institutional capital group just launch a new launch pad where they're seeking to fund scientific research for these exact purposes. I'm one of the largest, capital providers in the entire world. So I know that there's a lot of opportunity there, and more folks will be getting involved in it. But I think right now everyone is sort of talking about like, how do we get funding? How do we get funding? on the science side, what are people interested in? It seems to me that the things that are dominating are research heavy. They are the topics that maybe they couldn't get traditional funding for and are therefore striking out of their own. Hair loss, longevity, sexual health, mental health, like all of these types of things are you see them sort of popping up and coming around. I think that those are you know interesting things. I think obviously the longevity and like biohacking space is very powerful. But there's also another space that I find really interesting, which is around peptides. And Peptide DAO, founded by Hannah, has been like, I think, really interesting. It's a very interesting project. They're working on some really marketable type, commercializable type research that I think is going to be very successful. And so, I think that's kind of where DeSci is in its stage. It's still very, very early.
So, and as you're mentioning, researchers getting funding, AxonDAO has actually just officially launched our first open call for proposals. So I'm going to ask you, from your perspective as a community leader, as a community builder, how can we be of the most service to the community? How can we support both the independent researchers that are coming on board and hoping to have their ideas funded, and then the wider community that's looking to fund really powerful, impactful scientific research?
So there's DeSci has a big problem. The biggest problem DeSci faces is they're obsessed with answering the how question. Like every project you talk to, they're going to tell you how they're going to solve whatever the problem is that they're on. How. And I think the challenge is answering how questions doesn't actually motivate anybody. Answering a how question builds credibility. It doesn't build motivation or passion. You have to answer the why question. And so I think that what AxonDAO, by offering grants here, I think one of the things that you could help to do is shift that narrative a little bit to encourage, grant participants or applicants to really consider like why are they doing it? They're all going to write amazing white papers. They're all smart people. They're all going to have incredible projects with good scientific backgrounds, and they're going to tell you exactly how they're going to dissect a molecule and find the rare disease cure to whatever the A374D PC, whatever it is. Right? They're all going to do that. I think the real powerful thing that grant applications need to include is like why, because ultimately it's why is how you build a community. You have to tell people why. Not all of them care about how, and I think that is the big thing that DeSci is missing at the moment. It's like why DeSci, and that's why I've posted a number of times like stories about families getting funding for rare diseases like Curetopia is doing, other scientific breakthroughs that are occurring, and like I said, the peptide space and other research that's happening. That's why, and that's the story that needs to really be told in a big way. I think Axon sits in a really interesting position. Like I think you're a really influential voice in the space. Very powerful and reputable brand that I think could really be influential in moving the conversation from how to why. Yeah, excited about what that looks like.
Well, as head of content, I'm definitely going to take that as a compliment. So thank you.
Absolutely.
So to be honest, I don't know if you know that much about my background here, but I was one of the people that came on board that has no background in Web3 whatsoever. And I think that's part of the reason they brought me here. I actually came from a health and wellness space, so a lot of lifestyle, parenting, travel, and my degree is in psychology. And I remember talking to Chris and Mac at first, and we were having all these conversations. And I'm so grateful to them that they gave me the space to just kind of sit and soak it in and figure out what was happening. And I remember they were like, "You don't know what the hell we're talking about, do you?" And I was like, "Not even a little bit." And they said, "Good. When you get the messaging down pat and you understand it, that's how we'll be able to communicate it to other people."
Yeah, makes total sense.
Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest challenges I've seen in this space too, is that we don't talk enough about the why. The why is what got my attention. And I think we can talk to the people who understand Web3 and understand crypto and blockchain, but that's actually a small portion of the people that we're actually impacting. The people that want to hear about this may never actually buy a token, but they'll be directly impacted by the research that we're doing and that we're funding.
Yeah. This is this is something I'm super passionate about. So I'm like holding myself back to not go on a long rant here, but the crypto itself exists because people don't believe in institutions and because of the cultural loss of trust amongst institutions, right? So that sort of like was its like founding, and I think people have come to crypto and adopted it for that reason. Those are all people who answer the how question. Those are the engineers. Those are the people who talk about like the speed to transfer money is too slow, or like, I want to earn a higher yield or whatever. These are the guys who also are creating staking and restaking and rehypothecation and like, building out super, super technical, like in-depth infrastructure to facilitate these things. And no, they're super important, and I'm not discrediting them at all. But when everyone talks about retail comes to crypto when you can tell them why should I be involved in crypto? And when the market's up, everyone wants to be in crypto because you say, because I buy this meme coin and it turns into this, and I right? But the reason why they adopt it then is because you're telling them why. No, it may not be a reason any of us like. It may not be what we are like want to say, but that's literally what it is. Every retail person wants to get involved when you can say, why should I be involved? Well, because if you invest $5, you're going to take out 500, right? That's all I need to say. Everybody says, okay, fine, I'll download Coinbase. Everybody downloads Coinbase. They put in $50, they buy some meme coin, and then they wait. And it doesn't happen, obviously, but like that's the problem is crypto can't answer the why question. It can't. The reason why there isn't retail adoption is because they can't answer why. Why should I do crypto? My bank account is digital. I do operate totally digital. Like, why? And I think there are valid answers, obviously, from being in the space, and I believe there are valid answers. But those answers are valid to me. They're not valid to the general public. And like, my mom's not taking up crypto. She's like, why? Literally, why? And I think that is the thing that has to be captured. DeSci has an amazing opportunity to lead the way in this regard. And Axon sits sort of in the captain's chair of being able to do that. And it's like, it is to be able to champion the narrative of why DeSci is so critically important. Right? And like, if you take just a very simple thing like what Curetopia is doing, or even some of the stuff that you guys have come out with most recently, right? Well, why DeSci? Well, because without DeSci, you wouldn't have a cure to this disease. It's very simple, right? Because DeSci has cured this disease. Because DeSci has funded a minor research which has looked into something that no centralized institution would ever do, and has come to a conclusion, come to some sort of a solution, and that's turned into the cure for this thing. That's why. So when people talk to me, random people, they say, why are you involved in this like DeSci thing? I literally say to them, because DeSci cures diseases that centralized institutions aren't interested in funding. Every single person that I say that to goes like, oh, wow, okay. Well, I mean, because it speaks to that, right? It's just a very simple, this is why. Because DeSci cures diseases that centralized institutions have no interest in funding research on. Oh, yeah, okay. And that's true, because you can say to them, how many diseases do you know of people in your family who the doctors say to them, well, we don't have a cure for it. You know why you don't have a cure for Crohn's disease? It's because we're spending money on cancer research. All right? Like, I mean, that's the point. So you say DeSci solves that problem. And yet, sure, yeah, it's going to take time, and sure, money needs to come in, and yes, we need to be in from all this. But no, retail will wait for that stuff if you're willing to say to them, this is why, right? Today, DeSci is simply saying, oh, join my DAO and find a random wallet, try to jump through 17 hoops, to get over to Solana, right? Bridge your ETH that you bought on Coinbase over to the Solana chain. And then, by the way, you're going to lose like a big, and then you can buy this coin. Like, dude, no one's doing that. You know what I mean? It's not happening. And so this is where I think that conversation needs to change. Once that conversation changes, people's interest, their patience, their willingness to get involved at a deeper level, a higher level of commitment, go through more of those obstacles that exist today, they go away, and you introduce, I think a whole new wave of funding and users to your community.
So I'm going to ask you to do me a favor because I've never been able to get anyone to give me a good answer to this question, like a really good, succinct answer. And I think you might be that person.
No.
So, so for anyone brand new to this space, what is DeSci?
DeSci is a field of study that that combines the technology of the blockchain with the principles of science. And what it delivers is open, trustless, fast, and efficient research, cures, and delivery of those things to patients.
Yeah, I knew you were going to nail that.
I don't know.
That's great.
I don't know if that's nailed totally, but it's. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I think that's the best answer I've gotten. And I think you did a beautiful job of tying it into what the technology is, but also the impact that it makes, because I think that's really what DeSci is about. And to some extent, I think that's why people don't understand DeSci, is because when we lead with a crypto first narrative, people are expecting, oh, I'm going to buy this thing and I'm going to make this money. They're not looking at the broader implications of it.
Yeah, there's no question about that. There's no question, because because every project is stuck on funding. And so therefore they're just coming up to funding, right? Over and over and over again. And so, yeah, I think that's a big piece of it.
So if you had to bet on one trend defining DeSci for the next 10 years, what would you say it was?
One trend. So I think probably over the next 10 years, I think the opportunity for DeSci is to be is like, I think I would call it niche science, if that makes sense, or niche research. Like I think that there's going to be a wave of new research that's kicked off here that will be funded by DeSci, and I think like over the next 10 years, it's just basically going to be dominated by people researching in a real valid, structured way things that would never have ever been done again. So I would call it like niche science. I don't think it's like open science yet. I think that's wave 2, honestly. I think you have this sort of first wave, but then I think there is infrastructure and there are tools that are coming that people are building, but not quite, that are going to allow everyone to be involved in science. Let me just give you an example. Actually, I was on a call earlier this morning with a company that's doing sensors for weather. And the way that they do it is now you can literally on your iPhone, download their app, and it asks you guided questions about what the weather is in your environment. So it varies, public data available on weather based upon your location. You're verifying, validating, like talking through, just literally answering some questions about what the weather is. That's collected, verified, added to their database of weather data points, right? And what it does is it gives you hyper local reports. And I just think like, I can see that scaling. There's a project called Ranger where the idea is like, on your way to work, you take a picture of a tree, and every day you take a picture of the same tree. And what happens is, people who are scientists who are interested in that can see the lifespan of a tree in central London that's located at this specific location. What are the effects on a tree of city life, of city air, of like traffic, things like that. Well, we have evidence of 365 days of this tree here, right? Can we track that over a period of time? Is there moss that grows? Like I just see this like wave of people starting to be involved in science. So my dad's, I know I'm giving you a long answer here, but my dad's an architect. And one of the like most profound things for me is to be able to drive around places and say, oh man, my dad designed that building. Like that's a cool thing. I have nothing to do with that building. I have no connection to it. I have but it's like my dad did that, right? I feel like I kind of participated in it because, like I was a great kid or something. I don't know. But wouldn't it be, I think there's this powerful thing that's going to happen when you can help deliver health. And when you see somebody online talking about a product that you were a DAO member of, that you participated in, even in a small, minuscule way, whether it was by contributing money or whether it was doing some base level research, right? Like again, part of those Reddit subreddit groups, like you contributed to, you're part of the community that was backing this thing that now, like I said, has a product on the shelf of Walgreens and someone's online saying, oh man, I love this product. Like, how are you going to feel? It's be like amazing, right? You're like, I contributed in something. I helped to deliver health to like people. And that's amazing. And by the way, I contributed, I made money along the way because I was part of the DAO. And like now the token that I have is worth like that's coming. Like that's where all of this is going.
I helped see this thing come to life because of my support. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there was a point, honestly, recently where I started trying to explain this to people, this whole space. And I was like, it's kind of like Kickstarter, but for like science projects. So,
yeah, I mean, that's not a terrible way to do it. Yeah, I don't think that's very far off.
Yeah. And that's nice about that is that, you do get that sense of participation and pride, but so much of what people do is they're connected to the mission of the company that's bringing it together. Because to your point about having that why, there's always a story. There's always the like, I was looking for this and I couldn't find this and I'm here. And so many people feel recreated in that story that they're like, oh my gosh, I've had that same experience. So it's like, oh, I was looking for, a suitcase and I also needed a battery pack and like I was in the airport and my phone died and now we have the away bag and people are excited about it and they want to be part of what I don't think they see it just as like funding a product. I think they see it as funding a transformation in people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah. It's their way of impacting others. And, that is a motivation that like is extremely powerful and can move people and motivate them to do things, to a very, very high degree. And I think if you allow, as projects allow their communities to help contribute, but this is one of the things that we did really effectively at Tron, and why I think about things from an ecosystem perspective is like you have to activate your community to participate, and that means you have to give them meaningful things to do. They have to exist for a purpose, and they have to see that purpose, understand it, buy into it, and help contribute to it. They have to see success along the way. It can't just be simply, oh, join our Telegram, join our Discord, join our Twitter, join our Facebook, join our TikTok, like every whatever. And by the way, we're just going to blast announcements at you over and over again. Right? Isn't this cool? Oh, on Friday night, we'll run some weird games on Discord, and that will be like game night. Right? No one cares about that. Instead, what do? They all go to Reddit and they all contribute and they're all talking to each other and they're all educating each other on what they learned. Like if you go to some of those communities, man, there is powerful because you're seeing these people who are spending hours researching and coming and sharing their findings with the group. And the validation for them and the reward for them is being able to share. And the community going like, oh man, that's like amazing. I never thought about it that way. And that they're bought into that. Like that is powerful. That's how you create community. You don't create community by adding people to your Discord. Right? And I think this is the opportunity that DeSci projects have in building a community is to incorporate and bring your community as core members, as contributing members to what you're trying to achieve.
I meant to ask you this before, but what is a decentralized private computer?
The decentralized private computer is essentially it's decentralized storage but it's done in a private way. So it's using a technology like FHE, fully homomorphic encryption, or MPC, multi-party computation, or perhaps TEE, where your data is obscured from the public view of the blockchain, but remains programmable. So you can still use the data, but it's never visible to anybody on chain. So it's used for like for instance, like I just gave examples of like your bank account. No one wants your bank account on chain. Everybody wants the benefits of your bank account being on chain, right? Where you earn like real-time yield, like all sorts of benefits that the blockchain can bring to your bank account. But literally no one in crypto has their bank account on chain. Why? Because it's public. And so when you put through one of those technologies, that enables you to be able to, obscure that and still render the same benefits of what the blockchain would give to you.
That's so cool. And that makes so much sense. I didn't even actually, like I said, fairly new to this space. So I didn't even realize that as a potential pitfall, but you're absolutely right. It makes so much sense.
That's why institutions aren't adopting. It's why science, laboratories aren't publishing stuff on chains, because it's all public, and therefore they lose their competitive advantage. They just think about HIPAA, like all of the things, but that keeps, real companies from using the blockchain technology, even though they all can see the benefit of using it. There are some real hindrances to it that exist that keep them from that. And so therefore, some of these emerging primitives, like I said, FHE, MPC, TEs, others are helping to shape and kind of lead the way in that regard.
Okay, well, I have just one more question for you. So, if nothing else, what do you hope someone takes away from this conversation?
Oof. I hope that somebody would hear like what somebody would be maybe changed from negative to optimistic, and would be inspired to engage. And maybe that's a founder who says, I have an idea that I've been sitting on and I'm ready to do that. Maybe it's, somebody who's like, I don't care about DeSci, and maybe they are willing to consider it a little bit after the conversation, right? Like, I think if somebody was inspired to engage, that'd be awesome. And, oh wait, was this when I was supposed to say, that you'd have a lot of grant applicants come into AxonDAO?
Yes, that was what happened. I paid you $20 before this interview to say that. What happened?
I blew it. No. But I mean, look, that is one way of engaging, right? Is to take the opportunity that exists there to participate in these types of things. So yeah, it'd be great.
Thank you so much for making the time to chat with me today. I have to say, honestly, and I'm not saying this just because of what you just said, I am really encouraged. Like having this conversation and seeing the broader impact on the space, it's so refreshing to talk to someone who's so focused on what are we solving, what impact are we making, who are we helping, and to really center that in the narrative around decentralized science.
Yeah.
So,
Cool.
it is important. It is where we're going. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me on today and thinking of me to invite me to come do this. Really appreciate, just appreciate the opportunity, and definitely open to conversation anytime. Doesn't have to be on camera, but happy to chat anytime if I can be a help.
And one more thing, while we still have you before we officially close out, um, if people were interested in getting involved with the DeSci Alliance, where would they find you?
Yeah, so we're just on Twitter, DeSci Alliance. We're a community. We're not actually a Twitter account. Somebody else owns that Twitter account and has been growing rapidly. But we're a Twitter community, so you just simply go there. You can find me at Andrew Hemingway on Twitter, and we can connect that way for sure.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. This has been an incredible conversation with Andrew Hemingway, the founder of the DeSci Alliance. And I'll be seeing you next week for another episode of the AxonDAO podcast. Bye, everyone.